The galactic monitoring station, Helix 9, hung in the void like a massive mechanical flower, its petals constructed from alloys that could withstand the temperamental moods of nearby solar winds. To call it impressive would be like calling a supernova a bit bright. The station was a monument to interspecies cooperation, a place where dozens of different life forms worked together to monitor environmental anomalies across the colonized systems. It was, in the grand tradition of such endeavors, also a monument to bureaucratic chaos, technical malfunctions, and the occasional existential crisis brought on by incompatible biology. Today's crisis? A heat signature. Now, to understand why this was causing the kind of panic usually reserved for hull breaches or surprise tax audits, you had to understand something fundamental about the crew of Helix 9. Most of them, and by most we mean about 98%, existed in what humans would cheerfully call absolutely frigid conditions. The station's average ambient temperature hovered around a cozy 70 Kelvin, which translated to roughly negative 203 degrees Celsius, or negative 333 degrees Fahrenheit, for those keeping score at home. Toasty, right? Commander Uxmouth certainly thought so. He was currently hovering, literally, as his species didn't so much walk as glide through methane-rich environments, over the main monitoring console in the operations hub. His translucent form rippled with what could only be described as agitation, though calling it that was a bit like calling a Category 5 hurricane breezy. The commander's 4 sensory stalks were all focused on the same holographic display, which was flashing an aggressive shade of crimson that the station's designers had designated for "Things have gone horribly wrong." "This cannot be correct," Uxmouth announced, his voice emerging from a vocalization sac that bubbled like a very anxious aquarium. "Parsec, run the diagnostic again. 3rd time." The station's AI, nicknamed Parsec by a long-departed engineer with a sense of humor, responded with the patience of a machine that had explained this exact thing twice already in the past 4 minutes. "Commander, the diagnostic confirms previous findings. Cryogenic Maintenance Bay 12 is experiencing a localized thermal event measuring 310 Kelvin. 310 Kelvin. To put that in perspective, because perspective matters when you're talking about temperatures that could literally kill most of the crew, that was roughly 36.85 degrees Celsius, about 98 degrees Fahrenheit. The kind of temperature that would make a human go, "Huh, slightly warm. Maybe I'll take off my jacket." For the crew of Helix 9, it might as well have been the surface of a star. Kip Locks, the station's chief analyst, dimmed to a pale orange, their species equivalent of going white with shock. They were crystalline, roughly humanoid, if you squinted and tilted your head sideways, and they processed information by literally refracting light through their internal structure. Right now, that structure was refracting pure, unadulterated terror. 310? Kiplox's voice came out as a harmonic resonance, like someone playing a very worried xylophone. "That is, Commander, that is beyond catastrophic. That is, forgive my language, completely impossible for that sector." "Hence the alarm," Uxmouth replied dryly, which was impressive, given that he was essentially a sentient gas cloud. "Humfell, initiate emergency protocols. Level 3 containment." Humfell rippled into view, literally rippled, as her gelatinous form undulated across the deck plating with the grace of a very concerned pudding. She was the station's emergency protocols officer, which meant she spent most of her time hoping she'd never have to do her job. Today was not most days. "Level 3? Her voice quavered, which made sense given that her entire body was quavering too. "Commander, Level 3 assumes potential reactor breach or hostile intrusion. Are we certain? 310 Kelvin, Uxmouth interrupted, his stalks now pointing accusingly at the display, as if the numbers themselves were personally responsible for this nightmare. In a zone maintained at 70 Kelvin. Yes, Homfell, I am certain we need Level 3 protocols. The operations hub descended into controlled chaos, or what the crew thought was controlled chaos anyway. Alarms that most species could hear began wailing. Alarms that most species couldn't hear but could feel in their various organs, appendages, or energy matrices also began wailing. Blast doors started cycling. Evacuation routes lit up like particularly anxious Christmas decorations. And through all of this, standing at her workstation with the calm demeanor of someone watching paint dry, was Tina. Tina was human, which meant several things. First, it meant she was one of only 6 humans currently stationed on Helix 9, part of Earth's United Research Coalition's continuing efforts to prove that humanity could play nice with the rest of the galaxy. Second, it meant she was a thermal engineer, specializing in heat management systems, which was a bit like being a snowplow operator in the Sahara, given the station's usual temperature range. Third, and most relevant to our current situation, it meant she had absolutely no idea why everyone was losing their minds. She looked up from her console, where she'd been running routine diagnostics on the station's heating elements. The few that existed, anyway, mostly clustered in the human habitation modules. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore the standard-issue thermal suit that all humans on Helix 9 were required to wear in the common areas. The suit wasn't actually keeping her warm. It was keeping her cool, preventing her natural body heat from triggering every thermal sensor within a 10-meter radius. "Ah," Tina said, with the eloquence of someone who'd just walked into what appeared to be the apocalypse. "What's going on?" Uxmouth's sensory stalks swiveled toward her with the speed of a predator spotting prey, except the predator was terrified and the prey was confused. "Thermal anomaly. Maintenance Bay 12, 310 Kelvin. Tina blinked. "Okay. And? Kiplox's harmonic voice hit a pitch that could probably shatter glass, if glass existed in this temperature range without shattering anyway. And that is a temperature incompatible with life as most species know it. That is, they seemed to struggle for an appropriate comparison. That is like standing next to an active plasma vent. "It's 98 degrees Fahrenheit, Tina said flatly. The operations hub went silent, except for the various alarms, which continued their enthusiastic proclamation of doom. "It is," Parsec confirmed helpfully. "Approximately 98.33 degrees Fahrenheit. Yes." "Right," Tina continued, addressing the room of increasingly panicked aliens with the tone of someone explaining that water is wet. "So it's like a warm day. Maybe someone left a heater on or something?" Uxmouth's stalks actually tied themselves into a knot, which was a biological response his species only exhibited during extreme stress. A warm day? A warm day? That temperature would cause rapid molecular degradation in most of the crew. It would— "I'll check it out," Tina interrupted, because she was starting to get the picture that what she considered slightly toasty was apparently equivalent to walking into a furnace for everyone else on this station. "Bay 12, right?" "Absolutely not," Homfell burbled, her gelatinous form quivering with emphasis. "That environment is hostile. We need to deploy remote drones, establish a safe perimeter, possibly evacuate the entire sector." "Or," Tina said, already moving toward the equipment lockers, "I could just walk over there and see what's up. Bay 12 is, what, 5 minutes from here?" You cannot seriously be suggesting, Uxmouth began. I'm not suggesting, I'm volunteering, Tina replied, pulling out a standard equipment pack. Look, I get it, okay? Your biology can't handle those temps. Mine can. Let me go take a look before we evacuate half the station over what's probably a malfunctioning sensor. Kip locks flickered between orange and a sickly yellow. But the readings are accurate. Parsec confirmed. Then maybe something in there is actually that warm, Tina said, snapping the equipment pack closed. Which means somebody should probably go turn it off before it gets worse, right? The logic was sound, which made it all the more terrifying for the assembled aliens. The idea that someone would voluntarily walk into what they considered an inferno, and worse, walk into it with the casual attitude of someone going to check the mail, was so far outside their frame of reference that several of them simply stared at her in silence. I will monitor your progress, Parsec finally said, its synthetic voice somehow managing to convey a tone that suggested even the AI thought this was a terrible idea. Vital signs? Thermal readings? Environmental conditions? Should you experience any distress? I'll let you know, Tina finished, heading toward the exit. Honestly, guys, I'll be fine. It's not even 100 degrees in there. Uxmouth made a sound that his species typically reserved for mourning the dead. She speaks of temperatures that would boil our cellular structures as if they are pleasant. Humans, Kiplox whispered, their crystalline structure dimming further, are absolutely insane. Tina, already at the door, turned back with a grin that probably wasn't meant to be reassuring, but definitely came across as slightly unhinged from the alien's perspective. Hey, you guys literally breathe methane and think 70 Kelvin is comfortable. I'm pretty sure we're all insane by somebody's standards. And with that, she was gone, leaving behind a room full of aliens who were suddenly reconsidering everything they thought they knew about Earth's supposedly normal representatives. Should we? Humfell ventured quietly. Prepare medical containment? Prepare everything, Uxmouth replied, his stalks now monitoring the holographic display that tracked Tina's progress through the station's corridors. If she survives this, I am filing a formal complaint with the United Research Coalition about their definition of acceptable thermal tolerances. Noted, Parsec said. However, I should point out that human thermal tolerances are well documented in the Coalition database. Then the database, Uxmouth declared, watching Tina's biosignature move steadily toward what he considered certain doom, is clearly wrong. On the display, Tina's thermal signature showed a steady 310 Kelvin, exactly the same temperature as the anomaly she was walking toward. To Uxmouth's sensors, it looked like one small sun approaching another small sun, both of them impossibly, inexplicably hot. He didn't know whether to be impressed or horrified. He settled for both. The corridor leading to Maintenance Bay 12 was, by Tina's standards, freezing. The kind of cold that made her grateful for the thermal suit's insulation, even if wearing it made her feel like a walking sleeping bag. Her breath, which was warm enough to send the nearest environmental sensors into minor conniptions, fogged slightly in front of her faceplate before the suit's internal systems whisked it away. She could hear Parsec's voice in her earpiece, a constant stream of updates delivered with the enthusiasm of someone narrating a nature documentary about a particularly stupid animal walking towards certain death. Approaching Bay 12 entrance, ambient temperature in corridor holding at ID 72 Kelvin. Your vital signs remain improbably stable. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Tina muttered, reaching the bay's access panel. The door was sealed, standard protocol for any compartment experiencing environmental anomalies, but her override code worked fine. The panel blinked green, and the door slid open with a hiss that sounded almost disappointed. She wasn't being more dramatic about this. The temperature difference hit her immediately. Not because it was overwhelming, but because it was nice, actually. Like stepping from an over-air-conditioned office into a pleasant spring afternoon. The thermal suit's sensors immediately began screaming their digital heads off, and she could hear the operations hub losing their collective minds through the comlink. 308 Kelvin! Kiplox's harmonic voice was hitting frequencies that probably shouldn't exist. It's worse than we thought. Tina, you need to evacuate immediately. I'm fine, Tina said, stepping fully into the bay and letting the door seal behind her. Seriously, it's like, I don't know, maybe 80 degrees in here? Little warm, but nothing crazy. Little warm, Uxmouth repeated, and even through the comm static, Tina could hear the sound of his species' equivalent of hyperventilating. She describes conditions that would cause instant molecular dissolution as little warm. The maintenance bay stretched out before her, a cavernous space filled with the usual assortment of equipment, storage units, and the kind of organized chaos that came with any working maintenance area. The lighting was dim. Most species working in this temperature range didn't need much visible light anyway, but her suit's headlamp cut through the gloom easily enough. Okay, Parsec, Tina said, scanning the area. Where's this heat source coming from? Thermal signature strongest near the secondary equipment locker. Northwest quadrant, the AI replied. Approximately 15 meters from your current position. Tina moved deeper into the bay, her boots clanging softly on the deck plating. The sound echoed in the large space, competing with the gentle hum of the station's life support systems and the increasingly frantic updates from the operations hub. She was pretty sure Homfell was actively praying to some gelatinous deity, which would have been touching if it wasn't slightly insulting. As she approached the northwest quadrant, she started to make out details. The equipment locker was open. Someone had forgotten to secure it, which was a minor violation, but not exactly crisis-worthy. And there, sitting on top of a maintenance cart, like the world's most anticlimactic bomb, was the source of all this chaos. A coffee warmer. Tina stopped walking, stared at the small, innocuous device with its cheerful blue LED indicating it was still active and doing its job of keeping beverages at an optimal drinking temperature. The device that had, apparently, triggered station-wide emergency protocols and sent an entire crew of aliens into panic mode. "You have got to be kidding me," she said aloud. "Status report," Uxmouth demanded through the comm. "What is the source of the thermal event?" "It's—" Tina paused, trying to figure out how to explain this without sounding completely ridiculous. Failed immediately. "It's a coffee warmer." Silence from the operations hub. The kind of silence that suggested everyone there had simultaneously questioned their life choices and the nature of reality itself. "A what?" Kiplox finally managed. "Coffee warmer? You know, for keeping drinks hot? Someone must have left it on after their shift." Tina moved closer, examining the device. Sure enough, there was still a mug sitting on it. Or rather, what used to be a mug. The liquid inside had long since frozen solid in the bay's usual 70 Kelvin environment, creating what looked like a very sad popsicle. "Looks like it's been running for a while." "A beverage heating device," Parsec said, its tone somehow managing to convey both relief and extreme exasperation, "has caused a Level 3 containment alert." "To be fair," Tina replied, crouching down to get a better look at the warmer, "you guys consider anything above 100 Kelvin to be basically lava. From your perspective, this thing is a weapon of mass destruction." The coffee warmer hummed innocently, maintaining its surface temperature at a toasty 320 Kelvin. Just hot enough to keep coffee drinkable for humans, just hot enough to register as an apocalyptic thermal event to everyone else on this station. Tina reached out to examine the control panel, then paused. The thermal suit's gloves were thick, designed to insulate her body heat from the environment, and she couldn't quite get the dexterity she needed to access the warmer's small buttons. She needed better manual control, so she did what any reasonable person would do in this situation. She took off her gloves. The operations hub immediately erupted into chaos that made the previous chaos look like a relaxed meditation session. "Second thermal signature!" Kiplox shrieked, their crystalline form probably shattering every light sensor in the operations hub. 310 Kelvin. New anomaly detected. Same location. "It's getting worse," Homfell wailed, her gelatinous form likely melting into a puddle of pure anxiety. "The heat is spreading, initiating full evacuation protocols." Wait, Tina said quickly, looking down at her bare hands, which were, admittedly, the same temperature as her body, which was 310 Kelvin, which was, she was now realizing with growing horror and amusement, exactly what the sensors were picking up. "The second heat source is me. It's my hands." More silence. This time, the kind that suggested everyone's brains had temporarily shut down to process information that simply refused to make sense. "Your hands?" Oxmouth said weakly. "Yeah, I took off my gloves to get better grip on the controls," Tina explained, wiggling her fingers at the nearest sensor for emphasis. The thermal readings in the operations hub probably just did several loop-de-loops. "The suit usually masks my body heat, but without the gloves, the sensors can pick up my actual temperature." "Your actual temperature," Kiplox repeated slowly, like someone trying to understand a foreign language made entirely of screaming, "is 310 Kelvin. Well, technically more like 310.15. But yeah, that's about right for humans," Tina confirmed. She turned her attention back to the coffee warmer, her bare fingers easily accessing the control panel now. "Normal human body temp is around 98.6 Fahrenheit. Has been for, thousands of generations." "That is impossible," Oxmouth declared, though his conviction was clearly wavering. "No biological organism can maintain such extreme temperatures without catastrophic system failure." "And yet," Parsec interjected, because the AI was apparently developing a sense of humor, "she remains remarkably non-catastrophic." Tina grinned, examining the coffee warmer more closely. It was a standard-issue device from the human habitation modules. She could see the Earth Coalition logo stamped on the bottom. Someone had brought it down here, probably to keep their drink warm while working in the cryogenic environment, and then forgotten about it when their shift ended. The real question was whose coffee warmer it was. There was a name etched into the base, partially obscured by frost. She wiped it clean with her thumb, her very warm, very concerning, very human thumb, and read the inscription. "Lieutenant Xander," she read aloud. "Oh, that figures." "You know the owner of this thermal hazard?" Uxmouth asked, his stalks probably tying themselves into even more complex knots. "If it's who I think it is, yeah. Human officer, engineering division. Nice guy. Terrible about remembering where he puts things." Tina stood up, brushing frost off her suit with her bare hands. Each touch left a small patch of melted ice that immediately refroze in the bay's ambient temperature. "He left this thing on. It's been running for probably 3 days now, and everyone panicked because the sensors thought the station was melting down." "The station," Kiplox said faintly, "was melting down. From our perspective." "Right. But from my perspective, this is like— Tina looked around the bay, considering. Okay, you know what? This is actually pretty comfortable. The bay's ambient temperature mixed with the output from the coffee warmer has created this nice little warm pocket. It's probably the most pleasant place on the station for humans right now. The implications of that statement seemed to hit the operations hub like a physical force. Tina could practically hear the gears turning in everyone's heads, or equivalent cognitive structures anyway, as they processed what she was really saying. She wasn't suffering in the dangerous environment. She wasn't even uncomfortable. She was, if anything, more comfortable than she'd been since arriving at the station months ago. "Let me get this straight," Uxmouth said slowly. "The temperature we consider catastrophic. You consider pleasant." "I mean, I wouldn't want it much hotter," Tina admitted, reaching down to turn off the coffee warmer. Then she paused. "Actually, wait. Before I shut this off, let me check something." "Please, do not tell me you are about to do something inadvisable," Parsec said. "Define inadvisable," Tina replied, pulling up her suit's diagnostic panel. She accessed the station's environmental logs, scrolling back through the past month of data. Her suspicion was growing with each entry she read. "Parsec, how many thermal alerts has the station logged in the last 30 days? 42, the AI replied instantly. "And how many of those were in areas where humans were present, or had recently been present?" A pause. The kind of pause that suggested an AI was having what could only be described as a realization. "All of them," Parsec said quietly. Tina nodded, even though nobody could see her. The pieces were falling into place now, creating a picture that was equal parts hilarious and concerning. "Pull up the specific incidents. I want to see the details." The data streamed across her display, and Tina had to suppress a laugh. Or maybe she didn't suppress it entirely, because she was pretty sure Humfell made a distressed gurgling sound through the comm. "Okay, so," Tina began, reading through the list. "Thermal event on the 15th? That was in the human recreation area. Someone was probably using the shower. Hot water, you know. Maybe 315, 320 Kelvin. Perfectly normal for us." "That triggered a level 2 alert," Kiplox whispered. "Thermal event on the 20th, Tina continued, scrolling down. "Human medical bay. Someone probably had a fever. You know, when our body temperature goes up because we're fighting off illness. Might have hit 311, 312 Kelvin. We initiated emergency medical protocols," Uxmouth said faintly. "And this one on the 23rd. This is my favorite. Human gymnasium. The alert description says rapid thermal escalation and extreme heat generation from unknown source." Tina couldn't help it. She laughed. "Someone was exercising. When humans exercise, we generate more heat. Our body temperature rises a bit, we sweat to cool down. It's a whole thing, completely normal." The silence from the operations hub was deafening. "You are telling me," Uxmouth said, each word emerging like he was physically dragging it out of his vocalization sac, "that we have been treating normal human biological functions as station-wide emergencies." "For at least a month, yeah," Tina confirmed. "Maybe longer. I'd have to check older logs." "I may need to lie down," Kiplox announced. "Can crystalline beings lie down? I am going to find out." Tina was about to respond, probably with something reassuring about how this was an understandable mistake, given the biological differences, when a new alarm started blaring. This one was different from the thermal alerts. It had a lower, more urgent pitch that suggested something had gone very, genuinely wrong. "Oh, that's not good," Parsec said, which was possibly the understatement of the cycle. "What now?" Tina demanded, pulling her gloves back on and sealing them quickly. "Main coolant system failure," the AI replied, its synthetic voice taking on an edge that suggested even artificial intelligences could experience concern. "Primary and backup lines. Temperatures in the habitation ring are rising." "Rising to what?" Uxmouth asked, though from his tone he already knew he wasn't going to like the answer. "Current readings show progression toward 275 Kelvin in the main hub. Estimated stabilization at 285 Kelvin within the next 20 minutes if the coolant system is not restored." Tina did the math in her head. 285 Kelvin was about 12 degrees Celsius, 53 Fahrenheit. Chilly by human standards. Cold enough to want a jacket. For the crew of Helix 9, it might as well be a death sentence. "That will cause rapid degradation of cellular structures for most species on this station," Kiplock said, their harmonic voice shaking. "We cannot survive in those temperatures for extended periods." "The coolant control systems are located in Section 9, Parsec continued. "However, that section is already experiencing elevated temperatures of 280 Kelvin. No crew member currently on duty can safely access the area for the duration required to perform manual repairs." Tina understood what the AI was saying without it having to spell out the implications. The coolant system needed someone to physically access the controls and repair whatever had failed. But the area where those controls were located was already too warm for the alien crew to survive in. Too warm for them. But for a human? "What's the repair procedure?" Tina asked, already heading toward the bay's exit. "Absolutely not," Uxmouth said immediately. "You cannot." "Commander, with respect, unless you've got another thermal extremophile hiding on this station, I'm your only option," Tina interrupted. "What's the repair procedure?" Another pause. Then, reluctantly, "Parsec, brief her on the procedure." As Tina moved through the corridors toward Section 9, the AI walked her through what needed to be done. Manual reset of the coolant distribution nodes, rerouting through secondary channels, potential replacement of damaged coupling units. It wasn't complicated, but it would take time. Time spent in an environment that would slowly kill any member of the crew, except her. The irony wasn't lost on Tina. She'd spent the last 20 minutes being treated like she was the dangerous one, the thermal hazard, the biological impossibility that shouldn't exist. Now that same impossibility was the only thing standing between the crew and a very cold, very final end. "Approaching Section 9, she reported, watching the temperature readouts on her suit climb steadily. 260 Kelvin, 265, 272. What the crew would call catastrophically hot. What she called pleasantly cool. "Tina," Homfeld said quietly through the comm, "thank you for doing this." "Thank me when I actually fix it," Tina replied, reaching the Section 9 access door. "Besides, you guys would do the same for me if the station suddenly heated up to, I don't know, 400 Kelvin or something." "That temperature would vaporize most known matter," Parsec observed. "Exactly my point," Tina said, and stepped through the door into what everyone else considered an inferno, but what she considered a slightly chilly Tuesday, or whatever day it was. She'd lost track of the station's time system weeks ago. The real work was about to begin. Section 9 was, objectively speaking, kind of cold. Tina felt the chill even through her thermal suit as she navigated toward the coolant control systems, her breath misting in the air, which was probably sending the remote sensors into fresh conniptions. But she'd stopped caring about that roughly 10 minutes ago. The temperature had stabilized at 280 Kelvin, which translated to a brisk 41 degrees Fahrenheit. The kind of temperature that made her wish she'd brought a heavier jacket. The kind of temperature that would kill most of her crewmates within the hour. "I have visual on the control panel," Tina reported, approaching a wall of blinking displays and manual override switches. The setup was old school, physical controls for situations exactly like this, when the automated systems failed and someone needed to get hands-on with the machinery. "Running diagnostics now." Through her earpiece, she could hear Parsec feeding her technical readouts, while Yukesmouth and the others monitored from the operations hub. The problem was becoming clear. A coupling unit in the primary coolant line had fractured, probably from thermal stress. Ironic, given the circumstances, and the backup line's flow regulator had seized, trying to compensate for the increased load. "I need to access the coupling chamber," Tina said, locating the maintenance hatch. "That means removing the access panel and working directly with the coolant distribution nodes." "Be advised," Parsec said, "that will require removing your gloves for manual dexterity. The coupling units have precision threading that cannot be properly manipulated with insulated gloves." Tina looked down at her hands, then at the control panel, then had a thought that made her laugh, despite the situation. "So, let me get this straight. You're telling me to take off my gloves, the thing that caused a station-wide panic 20 minutes ago, to fix the problem that's actually threatening everyone?" "The universe," Kiplox observed weakly, "has a disturbing sense of irony." "Yeah, well, the universe can get in line," Tina muttered, unsealing her gloves and setting them aside. Her bare hands immediately registered on every thermal sensor in the section, and she could practically feel the operations hub collectively holding their breath, or equivalent respiratory functions. The coupling chamber required her to reach deep into the maintenance shaft, her fingers working by feel as much as sight. The fractured unit came free with some effort, and she examined it in the dim light. The break was clean. Metal fatigue, probably accelerated by the constant thermal cycling the station put these systems through. "I'm installing the replacement coupling now," Tina said, threading the new unit into place. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, tightening the connections with the kind of care that came from knowing one mistake could doom everyone aboard. "Parsec, start feeding coolant through the secondary line. Low pressure. I want to test the seal before we go full flow." "Acknowledged," the AI replied. "Initiating secondary coolant flow at 15% capacity." Tina watched the pressure gauges, her warm fingers still registering as minor thermal events to the station's increasingly confused sensors, adjusting the flow regulators with minute precision. The system responded, sluggish at first, then smoothing out as the coolant began circulating properly through the repaired line. "Primary coupling secured," she reported. "Moving to the flow regulator now. This one's going to be trickier." The seized regulator required partial disassembly, and Tina found herself elbow-deep in machinery that was, from the station's perspective, being serviced in impossibly hostile conditions. She was sweating slightly. The thermal suit's cooling systems were working overtime to compensate for her exertion, which meant her body temperature had probably climbed to 310.5 Kelvin. Catastrophic by alien standards. Mildly elevated by hers. "Got it," she announced, extracting the seized component and replacing it with a spare from the maintenance kit. "Regulators back online. Parsec, bring the system up to full operational capacity, slowly. I want to monitor for any pressure irregularities." The coolant system hummed back to life, and Tina could see the temperature readings starting to drop. 278 Kelvin. 275. 260. The crisis was passing, the station returning to its normal frigid state that made the crew comfortable and made Tina reach for extra layers. "Coolant system restored," Parsec announced, its tone carrying what might have been relief if AIs could feel such things. Temperature in habitation ring dropping to normal parameters, all sections stabilizing. The calm erupted in sounds of celebration, bubbling, harmonic chiming, rippling, and one very relieved methane cloud sigh. Tina allowed herself a small smile, reassembling the access panel with her still bare hands. "Tina," Uxmouth said, his voice carrying a weight that suggested he was about to say something significant. "You have, that is, your actions today have saved all our lives," Kiplox finished, their crystalline structure chiming with what was probably gratitude. "You operated in conditions that would kill us, without hesitation, without complaint." "Well," Tina said, pulling her gloves back on and sealing them carefully, "you would have done the same for me." "Would we?" Uxmouth asked quietly. "I am not certain we would have had the courage to walk into what we considered certain death, even to save others." Tina paused, considering that. "Sure you would. If the station suddenly heated up to 400 Kelvin, and there was something you could do to fix it, you'd do it, even if it meant risking yourselves. That's just what you do when you're part of a crew." 400 Kelvin would vaporize us, Homfell pointed out. "And 70 Kelvin would kill me," Tina replied. "But here we are, all living and working together in a station that maintains temperatures none of us would choose naturally. We make it work, because that's the job." She started the walk back to the operations hub, the station around her cooling rapidly toward its normal state. By the time she arrived, she'd need her full thermal suit just to avoid shivering. The brief window of comfort, if you could call 40 degrees comfortable, was closing. "For the record," Parsec said, as Tina navigated the corridors, "I am updating the station's emergency protocols. Human thermal signatures will no longer trigger automatic alerts." "Probably a good call," Tina agreed, "though you might want to add a note about coffee warmers, too." "Already done," the AI confirmed. "I have also flagged Lieutenant Xander's file with a reminder to properly secure personal heating devices after use." Tina grinned. "He's going to love that." "He should consider himself fortunate," Uxmouth said dryly. "His forgotten beverage warmer nearly caused an evacuation." "Yeah, but look at the bright side," Tina said, approaching the operations hub door. "At least now you know that when humans say something's a little warm, we mean it literally. We're not trying to be tough or heroic. We just run hot." The door opened, and she stepped into the hub where the entire crew was waiting. They looked at her. This impossible thermal extremophile human who had just casually saved their lives, with something approaching awe. "So," Tina said, breaking the silence, "who wants to help me return Lieutenant Xander's coffee warmer? Fair warning, I'm definitely going to give him grief about this." The aftermath of what would forever be known in station logs as the coffee warmer incident involved a lot of paperwork, several meetings, and one very sheepish Lieutenant Xander, who arrived at the operations hub looking like a man who'd just learned his forgotten lunch had nearly caused an interstellar incident. Which, to be fair, was pretty much exactly what had happened. "I can explain," Xander began, standing before Commander Uxmouth's workstation with the posture of someone expecting to be launched out an airlock. "Can you?" Uxmouth's stalks were doing something complicated that probably indicated he was torn between fury and exhausted relief. "Please, enlighten us. I am deeply curious how one forgets a device that nearly triggered a complete station evacuation." "I was running late for shift change," Xander said weakly. "I put the mug down to check something on the maintenance logs, got called away for an emergency repair in Section 4. and then forgot. For 3 days, Kiplox added, their crystalline form still flickering between colors as they processed recent events. For 3 days, Xander admitted. In my defense, I didn't know the bay's ambient temperature would keep the coffee frozen while the warmer stayed active. I thought it would auto-shut off when the mug got too cold. It is designed for human environments, Parsec interjected helpfully, where temperatures do not typically reach 70 Kelvin. Tina, who'd been watching this exchange from her workstation with poorly concealed amusement, finally spoke up. To be fair, Commander, this whole thing revealed a pretty significant gap in our protocols. We've been triggering false alarms for a month because nobody told the system that human body temperature is normal, not catastrophic. Uxmouth's stalks swiveled toward her. That is an accurate assessment, though I maintain that 310 Kelvin is objectively catastrophic from most biological perspectives. Most, but not all, Tina replied. That's kind of the point of having a multi-species crew, right? Different tolerances, different capabilities. What's deadly for you is comfortable for me. What's comfortable for you would kill me inside an hour. She has a point, Homfeld said, her gelatinous form having finally stabilized after the day's excitement. We have been operating under the assumption that thermal ranges outside our norm are inherently dangerous. But Tina functioned perfectly in conditions we considered lethal. More than functioned, Kiplox corrected. She saved us. While we panicked about her removing her gloves, she was calmly repairing systems in an environment that would have killed any of us. Xander looked between them, clearly trying to piece together what he'd missed. Wait, she removed her gloves? Why is that? Because, Tina interrupted, pulling off one glove and wiggling her fingers at him. Apparently, my bare hands register as thermal hazards. Who knew? The nearest sensor panel immediately lit up with a minor alert. Nothing like the earlier chaos, but enough to make Xander's eyes widen. Your hands are the same temperature as the coffee warmer. Roughly, yeah. Human body temperature. 310 Kelvin, give or take. Tina pulled the glove back on, which the station has been interpreting as crisis-level events every time one of us takes a shower, runs a fever, or does jumping jacks. 42 false alarms, Parsec added, because the AI was apparently committed to making sure everyone understood the full scope of the absurdity. All human-related, all completely normal biological functions. Uxmouth made a sound that might have been a laugh if methane breathers laughed. We have been treating your species' existence as an ongoing emergency. Pretty much, Tina agreed cheerfully. But hey, at least when there was an actual emergency, having a thermal extremophile on crew came in handy. Handy, Kiplox repeated, their harmonic voice taking on a tone that suggested they'd just discovered sarcasm and were trying it out. She describes preventing our deaths as handy. What would you prefer? Heroic? Dramatic? Tina grinned. I just fixed some coolant couplings in what I considered a chilly room. You guys are the ones who decided it was heroic. It was objectively heroic, Homfeld insisted. You walked into conditions we cannot survive. That you cannot survive, Tina corrected gently. But I can. Just like you, all function perfectly fine in 70 Kelvin, which would turn me into a popsicle. Different biology, different tolerances. Neither is better or worse, just different. The operations hub fell quiet as that sank in. It was a simple truth, but one that the crew, used to thinking of thermal extremes in terms of danger, hadn't fully internalized until today. Humans weren't recklessly brave for functioning in warm temperatures. They were just built for it. The same way Uxmouth was built for methane atmospheres and sub-zero conditions that would seem impossible to other species. "I am updating station protocols," Parsec announced. "Human thermal signatures exempt from emergency systems. Coffee warmers and similar devices classified as human normal equipment rather than thermal hazards." And a new note in the cultural database. When humans describe temperatures as a little warm, they mean it literally. "Add one more thing," Uxmouth said, his stalks gesturing toward Tina. "Thermal extremophile status officially recognized for all human crew members, with commendations for Tina for services rendered during today's actual emergency." "Not necessary," Tina started, but Kiplox cut her off. "Very necessary. You saved our lives while we were panicking about your gloves. The least we can do is acknowledge that your impossible biology is precisely what makes you valuable to this crew." Xander, who'd been silently processing all of this, finally cleared his throat. "So, can I have my coffee warmer back?" Everyone turned to look at him. "After," Uxmouth said slowly, "it nearly caused a station evacuation, triggered 42 false alarms, and revealed a fundamental flaw in our emergency protocols. You want it back?" "It's a really good coffee warmer," Xander said defensively. Tina laughed, actually laughed, the sound echoing through the operations hub and probably triggering some sensor somewhere that measured human joy as a thermal event. "Tell you what, Lieutenant, you can have it back on one condition." "What's that?" "You use it only in human-designated areas, you never leave it unattended, and you accept that you now owe me coffee for at least the next month." Xander considered this, then nodded. "Deal. Though I should warn you, my coffee is usually around 330 Kelvin. "Sounds perfect," Tina replied. Uxmouth's stalks did something that might have been the equivalent of shaking his head. "Humans! You operate at temperatures that terrify the rest of us, repair critical systems in conditions we cannot survive, and your primary concern afterward is beverage temperature." "Well," Tina said, settling back at her workstation, "priorities matter. Besides, after today, I think we've established that what you guys consider terrifying is just another Tuesday for us." "Thursday, actually," Parsec corrected. "Whatever. Point is, we all bring something different to this station. You guys handle the cold, we handle the heat, and together we keep this place running." Tina pulled up her console, returning to her routine diagnostics. "Now, if everyone's done panicking about human biology, I've got some actual work to do." The operations hub gradually returned to normal, or what passed for normal on a station where multiple species with completely incompatible thermal tolerances somehow made it work. The alarms had been silenced. The protocols had been updated. Lieutenant Xander had retrieved his coffee warmer with the solemn promise to never forget it again. And somewhere in the station's database, Parsec updated its files with a new entry. Human normal body temperature, 310 Kelvin. Previously classified as impossibly hot. Human assessment, just right. In the end, that was the real lesson of the day. One species' catastrophe was another species' comfortable afternoon. One species' impossible was another species' normal. And sometimes, the most dangerous thing in space wasn't hostile aliens or reactor failures. It was just someone forgetting where they left their coffee warmer. Though, to be fair, on a station where temperatures could kill you in minutes and biology varied wildly between species, maybe forgetting thermal devices was legitimately dangerous. Tina made a mental note to never leave her heating pad in the gym again, just in case.